Just imagine, if you could actually measure happiness, like checking your temperature or heart rate. What if science could tell you how happy you really are, not just how you say you feel? Sounds strange, right? In this videocast, we'll explore what modern psychology and neuroscience say about happiness. Is it a real number, a feeling, or something deeper that science still can't fully explain? Let's find out together. The science might surprise you.
Today we are tackling, well, one of the big ones, happiness. We all chase it, right? We know what it feels like. But when scientists try to pin it down, things get complicated really fast. So our deep dive today is all about this, really digging into that fascinating question. Can science actually quantify happiness? Can we really say, okay, I'm an 8 out of 10 happy, and have that number actually mean something solid in a lab?
That's exactly the mission. You send over some great sources that go deep into positive psychology. They detail how researchers define happiness, or more accurately, what they often call subjective well-being. And crucially, they outline the 5 main scientific methods people use globally to try and measure it. So we'll walk you through that toolkit. But maybe more importantly, we're going to really dissect the limitations, why it's tricky.
Yeah, the limitations sound key.
Understanding why that 8 out of 10 is, an estimate, not some precise temperature reading. That's really the core insight here.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because, before you can measure something, you need to know what you're aiming for, right? If I say I'm happy, does that mean I had a good coffee this morning? Or that my life feels meaningful? What does happiness actually mean to a researcher?
That distinction is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
In a research context, psychologists nearly always frame happiness as part of this broader idea, subjective well-being, or SWB for short. It's basically a wider lens. It covers how someone sees and evaluates their own life, both the feeling part and the thinking part.
Right, and the sources break SWB down really nicely into 3 main pieces. That helped me grasp it, separating the quick flash from the deeper feeling.
Exactly. So the first component is like an emotional balance sheet. Positive versus negative emotions. This is more about the day-to-day frequency. Are you feeling more joy, interest, hope, satisfaction, and less of the negative stuff like sadness, anger, fear? It's about that ratio, the intensity of daily feelings.
Okay, the emotional ups and downs. Makes sense. Then there's the second bit, life satisfaction. This sounds like the big picture view.
Precisely. This is where the subjective part really shines. It's a global cognitive evaluation. You got to step back and ask yourself, taking everything together, my work, relationships, health, how well is my life going overall? It's a judgment call you make about your circumstances.
Got it. Daily feelings, overall judgment. What's the third?
The third component, and it's often missed, I think, is stability and depth. The sources really highlight the difference between, say, a sudden burst of intense joy, you win something small, versus a deeper, more lasting kind of meaningful happiness. This stable satisfaction might feel less intense day to day, but it's more resilient, often linked to purpose.
Okay. So subjective well-being is this mix. Daily emotions, your overall life judgment, and this deeper, stable sense. Given all that complexity, how on earth does science even begin to measure it? It feels so qualitative.
It absolutely is qualitative at its core,
Yeah.
which is why researchers use multiple methods, kind of like triangulation. Science approaches it by, approximating. And we generally rely on 5 main ways to try and capture different bits of that SWB puzzle.
Okay, 5 methods. Let's start with what seems like the most common one, the one everyone's probably done. Questionnaires or self-reports, just asking people directly.
Right. On a scale of 0 to 10, how satisfied are you? Simple questions. But just asking one-off questions like that can be, a bit unreliable, which leads directly to the second method. Standardized scales.
So these are more structured.
Exactly. These are questionnaires that have been rigorously tested for reliability, for validity. They make sure the questions are actually measuring what they intend to measure and that the results are reasonably consistent over time or across similar groups.
These sound like the real workhorses of happiness research then. You mentioned 2 specific examples the sources focus on, the satisfaction with life scale, SWLS, and the PANAS, the positive and negative affect schedule. What's the difference between those 2?
Good question. They measure different components of SWB, going back to that breakdown. The SWLS is laser focused on that global cognitive piece, life satisfaction. It's actually really short, just 5 sentences. It asks for that overall judgment, not how did you feel yesterday, but more like how does your life stack up against your ideal?
Okay, the big picture judgment. And the PANAS.
The PANAS tackles the emotional component, that daily balance sheet we talked about. It asks you to rate how often or how intensely you felt specific emotions, both positive ones like interested or proud, and negative ones like distressed or scared, usually over a set period, like the past week.
That's a really neat distinction. One looks at your life structure, the other at your emotional climate. Okay, so we ask people directly, maybe using tested scales. Method 3 tries to get more objective, right? Biological or physiological measures.
Yes, this is where science tries to link happiness to something physical. Researchers look at things like heart rate variability, maybe certain patterns of brain activity, often in the prefrontal cortex, or they might measure hormones like cortisol levels, the stress hormone. But what's really fascinating here is that even though this seems super objective, the results are often frustratingly messy.
Wait, why, if they're physical measures, shouldn't they be clear-cut? Why imperfect? Can't we just scan someone's brain and see a happy light turn on?
The sources are pretty clear on this. It's because our inner emotional state doesn't always map perfectly onto our outward physiology. It's just not that simple. You could have someone feeling incredibly stressed inside, but they're practiced at controlling their breathing, keeping their heart rate steady, masking it.
Ah, I see it.
And, maybe more importantly, there's no single universally agreed upon biological marker, no happiness hormone or specific brain signal that means happy for everyone all the time. The brain activity linked to joy might also pop up during intense excitement or even deep concentration. It's just too complex to reduce it like that.
That makes a lot of sense. People can hide things, even from sensors. So maybe you need to catch people off guard in the moment.
Which brings us to method 4, experience sampling.
Exactly. This is a really clever way to try and get around the memory problems we'll discuss later. Researchers use tech, usually smartphones now, to ping people randomly throughout their day, maybe, say, 3 times between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. When your phone buzzes, you quickly answer, "What are you doing right now?" and "How happy do you feel?" Scale of 1 to 7.
So you get these little snapshots of real life as it's happening. That avoids trying to remember how happy you felt last Tuesday afternoon. Precisely. It gives a much truer average, hopefully, of someone's emotional state across different activities and times. And then finally, method 5 zooms way out, looking at the big picture, comparing groups or nations.
Like the World Happiness Report.
That's the most famous example, yeah. These studies combine large-scale surveys, often using those standardized scales with hard data. Things like a country's GDP per capita, healthy life expectancy, levels of social support, freedom to make life choices. It gives comparative view, rank ordering countries, not just scoring individuals.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. We've got these 5 methods, some quite sophisticated, yet you said up front that an 8 out of 10 is still just an estimate. Why? Why can't we fully trust the numbers even from these tested scales? What are the fundamental roadblocks?
Yeah, if we step back and look at the big picture issues, it really boils down to about 4 key challenges that just come with trying to measure something so internal, so subjective. First, and maybe most obviously, is just raw subjectivity. We simply don't all define happiness the same way. For one person, maybe it's about achieving goals, excitement, feeling energized. For someone else, it could be deep inner peace, calm, contentment. The scale doesn't know your definition.
Right, my 8 could be very different from your 8.
Exactly. Then second, and this is a huge one for self-reports, memory and thinking biases. This really undermines relying solely on asking people to rate their overall life. Research shows we are not good at accurately averaging our past feelings.
How so? What kind of biases?
Well, a classic one is the peak-end rule. We tend to overweight the most intense moment, the peak, and the very last moment, the end, when we look back on an experience or a period of time. So if you had a nasty argument right before you fill out that life satisfaction survey.
That recent end feeling is going to drag the whole score down, even if the rest of the week was great.
Precisely. It disproportionately skews your judgment, which, again, shows why that experience sampling method, catching you in the moment, is so valuable to try and counter these memory flaws.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, subjectivity, memory bias. What else?
Third challenge, cultural differences. Happiness isn't a universal concept in practice. Its meaning, its value, how it's expressed, it varies hugely across cultures. A scale developed in, say, a highly individualistic Western culture where happiness might be linked to personal achievement and feeling excited.
Right.
That same scale might completely miss the mark in a more collectivist culture where happiness could be more about social harmony, fulfilling your duties, or a quieter kind of contentment. The very word happiness might not even translate perfectly in function or ideal.
So using a scale designed in California might give you a number for someone in rural Japan, but that number might not accurately reflect their culturally specific sense of well-being.
Exactly. It measures something, but maybe not the thing you think it's measuring in that context. And finally, number 4 is the more straightforward problem of measurement errors. This includes things like poorly worded questions, misunderstandings. But a big factor here is social desirability bias. Let's be honest. Who wants to tell a researcher or even admit to themselves that they're only a 3 out of 10 happy?
Yeah, there's definitely pressure to seem okay, or maybe even better than okay. People might fudge their scores upwards, even unconsciously.
They often do. So you have subjectivity, memory playing tricks, cultural mismatches, and just basic measurement noise and social pressure. It all adds up.
Okay, so the tools are useful, but definitely not perfect precision instruments, more like estimates or indicators. Let's pivot then to how these tools are used effectively and what insights they've actually given us, despite the fuzziness.
Right, because despite the limitations, these scales have been incredibly valuable for research. They let us see patterns and correlations. Take how they measure happiness in children, for instance. You can't always ask a young child abstract questions. So researchers look for concrete proxies, observable things. They might ask parents or teachers to rate questions like, how many times did the child smile or laugh today? Or did they seem proud of completing a task? They turn the abstract feeling into more tangible actions, often scored 1 to 5.
That makes sense, finding behavioral markers. And for adults, using those scales like the SWLS.
With the SWLS, it's very clearly targeting that cognitive overall judgment. The 5 statements you rate yourself on are things like, in most ways, my life is close to my ideal, or the conditions of my life are excellent. It forces you to make that big picture assessment of your circumstances against your own standards.
And the PANAS, the emotion checklist.
That one is purely about the feeling state over a recent period. It's asking, did you feel determined? Did you feel alert? Did you feel irritable, nervous? It gives you separate scores for positive affect and negative affect, acknowledging, crucially, that you can actually feel both strongly at the same time. You can be excited and nervous.
Right, they aren't always opposites. Okay, so I fill out these scales, I do the experience sampling, and let's say consistently I come out around an 8 out of 10. What does science really say that number signifies?
The consensus in the sources is that the number itself is highly contextual. And 8 out of 10 is most powerful when tracking change within an individual over time. If your score reliably goes from a 6 to an 8 after, say, you change careers or find a really supportive community, that change is scientifically meaningful. So the numbers provide benchmarks. They're great for comparison, comparing yourself now to yourself last year or comparing groups, but they're not some final, absolute, perfectly precise measure of your inner state.
Got it. Useful for trends and comparisons, not for a definitive soul score. But looking at all this data collected using these imperfect tools, what are the big, consistent insights that have emerged? What really seems to drive deeper happiness, according to the research?
This is where it gets really consistent, actually. Across different methods, different cultures, the findings point overwhelmingly in the same direction. Long-term, meaningful happiness, that deeper subjective well-being, isn't primarily driven by fleeting pleasures or external things like how much money you make, beyond a certain basic level anyway. It consistently correlates with 3 core pillars: good quality relationships, engaging in purposeful activities that use your strengths, and maintaining decent mental and physical health. Those seem to be the foundations.
And that connects back perfectly to that third component of SWB we talked about earlier, stability and depth. It sounds like researchers had to make a clear distinction between just feeling good momentarily and that more enduring state. The sources called it authentic, durable happiness.
Yes, exactly. Authentic, durable happiness.
Yeah.
That's really the target researchers are often interested in. It's that stable satisfaction that comes from living in line with your values, having strong social connections, feeling like you're contributing. It's different from the short-lived buzz you might get from, buying something new. It's the quieter satisfaction from mastering a skill or being there for a friend.
And just to close the loop on the biology angle one last time, all this research into brain chemistry, hormones, the final word is still that there's no single biological happiness fingerprint.
That's the current understanding, yes. Despite immense effort, no single biomarker, not a hormone level, not a specific brain activation pattern, has been found that reliably and uniquely represents happiness across all people and situations. It seems happiness is just too dynamic, too intertwined with our thoughts, our culture, our immediate situation to be reduced to just one chemical level.
So summing it all up, how should we think about measuring happiness then?
I think the analogy one of the sources used is really helpful here. Happiness isn't like measuring temperature. You can't stick a thermometer in and say, exactly 27.3 degrees Celsius of happiness. It doesn't work like that. It's more like touching a radiator. You get a sense of how warm it is. You can estimate if the room feels comfortable. You can tell if it's getting warmer or cooler over time. We use our tools, the surveys, the scales, the biological hints, to observe, to ask, to estimate. But there's always going to be a degree of, well, estimation involved. Uncertainty remains.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you listening right now? The tools aren't perfect, but they are useful. They help researchers and maybe even us individuals understand what factors tend to boost well-being across populations. They help us track if changes we make in our lives are actually moving the needle on our mood or life satisfaction over time. It's about the patterns, the trends, the correlations.
Exactly. It's about getting a better sense of the landscape, even if we can't map every single contour perfectly.
Right. So here's a final thought to leave you with, building on all this. Science seems pretty clear that the deeper, more durable kind of happiness, that authentic, durable happiness, comes more from purposeful activities and good relationships than from chasing a high score on a momentary scale. So, forgetting the 0 to 10 scales for a moment, what small, consistent action or feeling could you maybe track in your own life just for yourself as an indicator? Something that tells you if you're moving towards that deeper sense of well-being. Maybe it's how often you felt genuinely absorbed in something last week, or how many meaningful conversations you had. Just something to think about. What's your personal qualitative measure of authentic happiness? Mull that over until our next deep dive.
It was very interesting for me when I found out happiness isn't just a smile or a good mood. It's a mix of biology, mindset, and life experience. And yes, science can measure some parts of it, but not everything. Maybe real happiness is less about measuring and more about living it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep exploring the science behind everyday life, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.